Yep. Hey team, welcome to week 2 of the KMR Q&A. This week we are talking all things nutrition, what to eat, when to eat it, how to eat it, how much of it to eat, what to drink afterwards, how soon you should go to the beer stations at the Run Hub at KMR, powered by Salomon. This week joining me, we have the fantastic Karen Hill from Holistic Coaching. Karen, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Maini. Thanks for having me along.
It's good to have you here. For those who don't know, Karen has volunteered with us at KMR. She's run KMR. She does our KTS events, loves a mountain bike, but also more importantly for you guys and what we're going to go through tonight, nutrition, because it's really important. We are 39 days away from the event. It's coming in really quickly. Let's have a chat about what we can do in getting our nutrition right as we gear up for our event as we run with Kunani. So I'm going to start off, Karen. We are 5 weeks out. What should we be thinking about at this point with our nutrition getting ready for KMR?
Yeah, so at this point, I would hope, a lot of people have started thinking about what they're going to be having and, trialing some things through their run. Ideally, you want to start, your nutrition planning probably 12 weeks out from an event, which can seem like a long time for, some people, but it really gives you a lot of time to test different foods, practice your hydration, and really nail down that nutrition plan. So the main thing is don't leave it to the last minute. If you haven't thought about it, this is a really good time to actually start thinking about it and practicing with what's going to be available at the aid stations as well is really important. So I think for the ultra marathon in particular, it is really a kind of an eating and drinking race with a bit of, a bit of running, a bit of scenery thrown in there as well. So it really pays to practice eating a lot through running. It's going to keep you healthy. It means you're going to get more out of your training. And it also means, less risk of injury, especially 5 weeks out. So the key points that I would recommend for people, it's most important doing the ultra, and then I'll work back with some of the other distances as well in terms of choosing a variety of foods. So it's about having, maybe like a sport-specific food, something savory, something salty, and something sweet. So that way, you're covering all bases and you're thinking about what food you actually are going to enjoy eating through the run. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things I've picked up there is you've talked about practicing with your nutrition coming into this. So I'm rocking up to the Run Hub. It's 5:30 the morning of the race. So I'm ready to go. I look across and there's a fancy new gel sitting over there on the table. Do I grab some and take them with me, or?
So that's it. The golden rule is generally don't try anything new on race day. So out on course, there's going to be Hammer products at the feed stations. So it's always handy if you are going to be using the feed station products that you actually try them through training. And I'm pretty sure I've seen Kat had put out a post that entrance to KMR had a discount for some of the Hammer products. So there's going to be gels. There's going to be the electrolytes out on course. So grabbing some of those prior to race day just to make sure that like the consistency, the texture, and the taste is all going to be okay. And, you're not actually going to feel sick or anything if they're some of the products that you're going to choose. So,
yeah, cool.
General rule of thumb, never try anything new on race day.
Nothing new on race day. I think all of us runners have seen those photos of the effects of what can happen with gels that we haven't tried before. It can be pretty disastrous, especially out there in the bush. So leading up to it, we're practicing our food. We're trying nothing new. One of the big things we hear is that catch cry of, I carb load the night before. When should we start our pre-race carb up our pre-race, getting our energy levels right with our nutrition?
Yeah, so you actually want to start that 1 to 2 days before your event. So it's not just about having like a big bowl of, rice or pasta the night before. And I will also say carb loading isn't an excuse or a way to neglect your everyday training and eating through your training. Because if you haven't been fueling your training, say for these 5 weeks leading up to the event, then carbohydrate loading for a day or two beforehand isn't actually going to save you, if that makes sense. So it really actually starts like from now. So, you think about your everyday diet, and that's really about making sure that you're having your balanced meal. So, your carbs, protein, fats, and colors at each meal, and snacks, and that will be adjusted. Your carbohydrate portions will be adjusted based on the training load that you are doing. And a good reference for that is, and people can Google or we can put a link up, is the performance plates. And they're a resource that shows you how to build a meal and a snack based on your training load. So there's versions for vegetarian and vegan, and there's also like the meat option with those performance plates as well. So it starts from today around that, and then fueling your training sessions. So at this point in the lead up to the event, you don't want to be doing any fasted training. Unless context matters. I will start by saying context does matter with nutrition, but as a general rule, at this point in training, where you would be in a training phase, if you have a coach and they do a program, or even if you don't, making sure that every run you go out on, you've eaten before, you eat during, if required, like if the distance is long enough, say if it's going to be over 90 minutes or even sometimes under 90 minutes if you've got some really hard intervals that are happening there. And then either timing your next meal following that training session. And that's, so when I talk about eating before and during, that's really talking about carbohydrate intake beforehand and during. So we often talk about things being lower fiber, especially for running, because there's a higher risk of gastrointestinal upset, and fiber is, I guess, a main cause, or can be a main cause of that, slowing the digestive system down. So it is about planning, because fiber is a really important part of a healthy diet and maintaining a healthy digestive system, but it's just about the timing. So, and then eating during your runs is about that carbohydrate. So in the lead up to, say, KMR, you want to be making sure that you're having at least 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, as, a minimum. And that's going to be for most things from, say, like the mountain run distance and up. And, for if you're used to eating and you can tolerate more, then you might be even looking at a little bit more than that. And so you can get that from a combination of, gels, food. The intensity depends on how much solid food you may have or you may be able to tolerate and digest. So I've gone off track a little bit in terms of the lead up, but it's important to think about not just the carbohydrate loading in just that 1 to 2 days. So coming back from, say, we're starting 5 weeks out, you're like, shit, I haven't actually even really, thought about, any of my nutrition in any part of this. So it's really from now, take a look at the performance plates, think about your everyday diet. Doesn't have to be complicated or, hard or anything like that. Some rice, some salad, and a protein source, whether that's meat or non-meat. And that's a balanced meal. Fuel your training before, during, and directly after. And then you'll get to those couple of days out, where the focus is really on carbohydrates and making sure you're essentially starting the event with a full tank of energy. And that's what the carbohydrate loading is about. And I will say you do need to practice that as well, because to actually eat the required amount of carbohydrate to make sure that your muscles are actually loaded with the energy, sometimes it might not be for everybody, and getting the actual amount right, you want to practice that in the lead up. So if you've got some big run adventures coming up, and it's a perfect time to practice doing that. So you want to even just focus on each meal will just have a carbohydrate focus. So you take away more of the veggies and the high fiber for those couple of days, and focus more on your more processed type carbohydrates that you would probably typically say are maybe unhealthy, but they do have their place in an endurance training diet where you need to actually fuel and get that energy, because you don't want heaps of fiber sitting in your gut just when you're about to run, anything from the mountain run, through to the ultra, that's going to increase your risk of trail side emergencies.
A little emergency at the trail side. So that's the lead up, and that's absolutely fantastic. And so guys, make sure that you are training that as you're going through your training that eating, because if you get to an event like this or a long distance event and you haven't trained to eat, it can be incredibly hard to then start eating in the middle of a run.
Yes. So
we've arrived at, as I say, up at the run hub there. We're ready to go. It's early in the morning. What am I putting in myself just before the go time? I'm guessing it's not a massive, great breakfast. I'm guessing it's something light, something small, just to fuel, because we know this race, there's no let up from the get-go. It's straight up the side of the mountain immediately.
Yeah. And so that's where, if you have, fueled really well in the lead up to the event, you have done your carbohydrate loading, your muscles are fueled, what you have on race morning is really just like a top up. So it will be food that is familiar for you. Again, it's not trying anything new. And typically, because it's early, it's that balance of not compromising your sleep too much to get up with enough time to let something digest. So some people might be comfortable with, an oats-based thing, but that's even erring on the side of too high in fiber. So you might go either, like toast and jam, or some banana, some, a couple of little pancakes and some juice. So often the more liquid-based the food or drink, the easier it is going to be to digest, and the quicker it's going to be to digest. So, and also if the food is lower in fat, lower in fiber, and lower in protein, it's going to digest a lot quicker and a lot easier as well. Because like you say, once you start that first section, up to the very first feed station is predominantly uphill, essentially. So you want to think about making sure that you're comfortable. It's probably going to be a little bit higher intensity, through that section, just through the nature of that. So thinking about what you can actually tolerate in terms of digesting, and making sure that you're not going to give yourself like a stitch or any gastrointestinal issues in that first part of the event.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so we're underway. Lincoln sent us on our way. He's given us our yule to start our race off. We're heading up the mountain. You talked about that 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour in training. Is that the same sort of level we're going to be doing in a race, or do we back it off a little bit given the distance we're doing?
So you'll practice whatever it is you're doing in training. So, for instance, I'm running the ultra this year. So, I'll actually take on about 80 grams of carbohydrate per hour. And after that sort of first feed station section, then I'll also start having some foods and things that actually have a little bit of protein in them throughout that as well. So 60 grams is generally a minimum. But if people aren't used to eating that through their training, because it's like that thing, the more that you do it, the more efficient your body is at breaking that down as well. So, there will always be the argument around, longer events, you're going a bit slower, you use more like fat as an energy source and things like that. But you typically still need to have more carbohydrate available there. And the fat burning side of it, you will actually want to have done all of that kind of metabolic training back in the very early start of your training. So that's sort of where the focus is more on carbohydrates and adding maybe a small amount of protein in. And obviously somebody's intensity and what somebody's comfortable eating will also change some of those things as well. So it is a little bit personal, but 60 grams as a minimum. If you're not there, I'd be really pushing to practice that over the next couple of weeks and seeing, where you can get to. And if you're not sort of anywhere near there, then just start small and build up.
Okay.
And if you're above that, so, some of the front runners, even in the ultra, their intensity is that they will be burning predominantly carbohydrate, for most of that race, even though they'll be out there for, 6-7 hours. Just their intensity will mean that they may not, be able to tolerate much else, but they may be able to burn, may be able to take on 80 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And
yeah, okay. So complete novice here. I'm starting to run off. Thanks for that information, Karen. That's great. The hell do I eat to get 60 grams of carbohydrates? What am I getting that from? What would typically have that in it? Because, I'm not really sure. I've got my gel that says this. I've got my Vegemite sandwich that's that. What sort of things am I eating to get to that 60 grams of carbohydrate level?
Yep. So you want to have generally, 2 to 3 gels per hour will get you to 60 grams. But you are typically, not going to eat just the gels over that time. So you want to try and mix in a little bit, of whole food if that's comfortable for you. And so that will be, a typical Vegemite sandwich is probably going to have, 30 to 40 grams just with the 2 slices of bread. A jam sandwich is going to have a little bit more. And then if you're picking up some snakes at the feed station as well, around two snakes is going to be 20 grams of carbohydrate. So, it might be in 1 hour, you take on, say, a Vegemite sandwich and like 3 snakes. Because a Vegemite sandwich is also going to give you a bit of a salty flavor, a bit more of a savory flavor, rather than just all sweet foods. And then, the next hour, you might take on a couple of the hammer gels and then grab a muesli bar to go with that. And you'll just keep nibbling, throughout the whole event. And there are definitely times where you might feel a bit nauseous or, depending on the weather as well, that can affect how you feel or digest. Like if it's super hot, the flavors change when you're 4 or 5 hours deep into a thing. So that's where practicing all of this through your training and being out in different conditions to know what the foods are going to feel like, and knowing what's going to be at the aid stations and knowing what you can eat and tolerate from that range is really useful.
Yeah, so I know it's one of those things. It's a little bit different in the trail running community, obviously, because you only got those aid stations at certain points, and you're on your own. And those times when I did my Bruni, it was someone was there every 2Ks going, eat this, eat that, eat this.
Yeah.
Do you think it's worth putting? We all have our trusty old Garmin's on our wrists or whatever we're wearing. Is it worth having an alarm set on that tells you to eat at certain times, or just when you're feeling it?
No, so it can actually help to, eat on a regular basis and get into that habit, because it can even be, through any of the distances. You go through those patches where you might not be, feeling too great. You don't feel like eating. You don't feel like you need to eat. Your stomach's a bit tight, but it's about, still actually being able to put something in, and it might be changing that up. So, if you don't feel like having a sandwich, it might be something a bit easier, whether it's, some liquid carbohydrates, but still whenever that alarm, or, if you have set your schedule to eat every 20 minutes, then it's making sure you stick to that. And it's knowing that sometimes you're not always going to feel like it, but you still need to do that, so that you're maintaining, a minimum amount of food going in per hour, so that, you can get to the finish line in the best shape possible. Because you generally will come out the other end of, a little black hole is what I like to call them. And it often helps if you have a food that you really like to eat, and again, working that out in training, whether it might be like a little chocolate, or it might be, a little savory type scroll or roll, or something that you might have hidden in one of your feed bags, or, something that you're carrying on you for those moments when you're like, I really don't feel like anything, but I know I love insert whatever food it is, to get you through that moment.
Yeah. So what's the go-to food for Karen Hill when she's 47 kilometres in this year, struggling a little bit? What's the go-to for you?
Well, I actually keep it pretty simple. And on my run adventures, in the lead up to this, it's actually like a good old jam sandwich, and Vegemite, not together, just separated out, and mix, just alternating between sandwiches, gels, and lollies. And I'll have some crisps, as well through that. And, that's sort of just enough variety. I just need to have some salty and savory mixed up in there. And then for me, it's just getting into a routine and a rhythm. And it's just eat what I need to eat every hour. And pretty much my plan, this is what I generally recommend people to do. It can look exactly like this. I'm not sure if you can see that. So you set out like 0 to 1 hour. What are you eating? 1 to 2 hours. What are you eating? It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but I know what I need to take. I know what I need to eat where. And when you think about KMR, it's also thinking about the terrain and what's coming up. So in that first leg of that event, it's probably going to be a bit harder and a bit more intense with that uphill. So it's about choosing things that digest easier, don't require, a lot of actual solid chewing. So it'll be more gels and more liquid-based carbohydrates in that first part of the event. And then once I'm through that first feed station, it's then swapping into something a bit more solid. So because when you put food in, you then got to have blood go into your digestive system, and blood trying to still go to your muscles. So it's about keeping it simple and easy.
Nice. It's interesting you talk about muscles there. We've got Luke Christensen online with us. Thanks for joining us, Luke. And for anyone else out there, if you've got a question for Karen, chuck it up in the comments. We will grab into it and get you some advice, hopefully, on the questions you're asking. So what Luke's asked us, Karen, he said, I often experience muscle cramps in my legs during long-distance activities. Are there any specific food or carbohydrate combinations that could help prevent cramping either before or during the event?
Yeah, so cramps are really interesting. And there's a few different, I guess, ideas with cramps. So there's 3 things that I would suggest starting off with. And so one is making sure that you're actually eating enough carbohydrates through, before, during, and after your runs. So carbohydrates obviously provide energy for our muscles, our brain, during exercise and outside of exercise, but they also play a really important role in muscle contraction. And if you don't have enough, that is, where it can actually lead to cramps. It's a very simplified way of kind of explaining it. But the second thing would be hydration and sodium, and making sure that you're starting your your runs in a hydrated state, and also making sure you're taking on enough fluid and also sodium through your runs as well. So they're the three things that I would look at first. The other things with cramps can be that you are like pushing your muscle capability outside of what you have trained for. Say if you are in a race situation, or even, an event, an adventure that you haven't that is way above what you generally would do, and you're pushing your muscles, outside of that, whether it's duration or intensity, then that can also bring on cramps as well. So I look at like your fueling, so your carbohydrate intake, your hydration, and your sodium. And if you're doing all of those things, then you can look at things like pickle juice is supposed to be something that sort of has helped, and there is a little bit of research around that as well. But let's start with the big three first.
Yeah, pickle juice sounds absolutely delicious. I can't wait to try some of that.
Although pickle sandwiches are actually great.
Yeah, pickle sandwiches are great.
Yes.
We do have a question there from Francis Collins as well. And we're going to do that one, and then I'm going to get you to chat a little bit about what's at our aid stations and, what people are going to find there, because it's all great for us to say you should do this, 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 and this. What's actually going to be there for you at the fabulous aid stations where our volunteers do an amazing job of getting you through the race. So Francis Collins put up there, any recommendations on using caffeine during the event, daily limits, timing, etc.?
Yes. So caffeine is actually one of, I guess, it's a fairly well-researched supplement for its effects for racing. And I will suggest even looking further on the Australian Institute of Sport website. They have some really good supplement fact sheets, and there is one on caffeine there as well. So with caffeine, usually recommend, obviously try it during training, but anywhere from 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So what you want to look at, you generally start, with the lower end, and obviously try this in training, because there are other side effects to caffeine if you're not used to having that, and obviously making sure that you don't have any other complications or health complications, I should say, before trialing bigger doses of caffeine to what you're used to. So starting at 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and you might take that depending on whether it is, say, like a no-dose form or a chewing gum form, will depend on the timing before the event, and it usually will stay in your system for 4 to 6 hours. So that's trialing that in some of your longer events. So to get your specific amount, obviously there is caffeine in the coffee and Coke and, those other caffeinated drinks, but the content varies quite a bit. So that's where it can be useful actually using a specific product that the exact amount that you're putting into your system there, and definitely try that through training, so that you can obviously start with a smaller dose, and then be able to either you get a response from that, or you might try a little bit more. But yeah, definitely trialing that. And then through a race, just taking into consideration, some gels will obviously have a little bit of caffeine in them as well, and you just need to be mindful of that. Obviously some people don't actually or can't tolerate caffeine, so just be mindful of what you pick up at at feed stations. But yeah, start with 3 milligrams, and you can definitely use that like before and during the events.
Brilliant. Sounds like Frances has got a couple of training runs up to our good friends at Lost Freight for a long black and then back down the mountain as part of a training. Now, let's talk about those aid stations. What are our competitors going to find? They've gone through the first leg. As you said, it's all uphill. You are now standing on top of Cunarnyi. The sun's coming up. What are we finding at the aid stations?
Yeah, so at the aid stations, they are going to be covering like all bases in terms of what I touched on in that variety at the start, in terms of having, a sports specific kind of food. So we've got the hammer gels. There's going to be a variety of flavors there. And then there'll be real food options in terms of sandwiches. So this year we're going to have a couple of different flavors. So there'll be, your jam sandwich, but then there will also be a savory option, whether that might be a Vegemite sandwich option, so that people are getting some sodium and also having that savory option at that feed station as well. There'll also be a carbohydrate drink available there as well, and also the Hammer Endurolites. So they're electrolyte fizz tablets that people can just pop into their bottles as well. There will also be a range of muesli bar flavors, crisps, so little packets of chips, so that you have, again, that change in texture and also a kind of salty and savory food. And then we'll also have like some lolly snakes, like either Tim Tams will be there as well. And then also, I think it's a Fern Tree. There'll be like the hot drink options as well. So like your coffee, tea, Milo, and also like a chicken type soup. So nice. which covers a lot of those different varieties essentially. So you can pretty much come into the aid stations, and that's where, when you're heading out on your long runs, there'll also be fruit as well. So you have your bananas, the Tasmanian apples, watermelon, grapes, and things as well. So they can be kind of refreshing, just for something a little bit different through there. So all of the feed stations are going to be covering, a lot of bases. So it's really going to be about making sure that you have trialed those things in your training as well, so that it makes it really easy for somebody in the ultra, or even in any of the distance runs, because we've got such a wide variety of things there that unless there's something very specific that you want or something like that, then you don't have to actually pack too many other things.
Yeah, that's a really good spread. I think if I got up to one of those aid stations, that might just about be where I'd finish it for the day. Just stay there on those lolly snakes. Now, of course, you've made your way through your events. You've spent some time running with Cunarnyi. You've been up and you've had your Hammer Nutrition. You've grabbed an apple from Hanson Orchard's office. You come down that final stretch. You come around the chute. You get a big high five from me on the way across the line. I'm guessing then it's just straight over for beer and pizza, or are we doing something else post-race to refuel?
So we actually want to, before we get into the beer, we can maybe add the pizza into the recovery nutrition. But we just want to try and refuel, rehydrate, and start the repair process prior to getting into the beer side of things. So especially if you are doing multiple events across the weekend, like I know some people might do the mountain run and the vertical kilometer, or now there's the downhill as well. So you want to make sure that you are ticking essentially what we call like the 3 R's for recovery. So you want to make sure that you have your protein to start that repair process for your muscles. You want to refuel your muscles with carbohydrates so that you're putting that energy back into them. And you need to rehydrate with fluids. So bulk nutrients will be providing some of the products at the recovery station. So generally head over there, get some carbohydrates, proteins, and fluids on board, and then go and have your beers. But then making sure that you do follow up with a proper meal, within that, hour mark of finishing. So there's generally, heaps of really good food trucks around the event village as well. So, going and getting a rice and protein type thing, or, potato. And so long as it's got that like carbohydrate, protein source there, and then making sure that you rehydrate as well. And that's just going to mean that, you're actually going to recover from that effort and be able to, get going again a lot quicker than not refueling properly, hitting the beers. I mean, you can hit the beers after you've refueled, within moderation, of course, or even alcohol-free is also a good option. And yeah, so it's definitely going back into, and I guess if for the numbers people out there, you're generally looking at least like 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. So however much you weigh, you essentially want to eat that amount of carbohydrates. So, you might be like, what does that even look like? If you're thinking about, trying to think of, it might be like 2 sandwiches, whether it's like 2 cheese and salad sandwiches is going to give you, sort of 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrate. Or you might like put some of the, say if it's the bulk nutrient sports fuel, that has a mixture of carbohydrates and protein in it and fluid. So you're ticking all those boxes in one go. So it's about kind of keeping it simple, but making sure it's enough.
Perfect. And we often forget, we always think, the race is done, cool, I've stood around and run hard, I've had this, that. But the days afterwards, when you're coming down, off the high of competing, having run with Kanani and, every step a story, you've got all that up. What are we eating in the week after just to make sure that we are recovering properly? Because we're heading on to our next event soon enough. How do we get our recovery going the best in the week after?
Yeah. So that's where we really want to focus on what I call like your colors, making sure that you're adding your colors into your plate. So your fruits and veggies. So, and this is where, in the lead up those couple of days beforehand, your fruits and veggies and colors might have been, should have dropped off. So you're dropping your fiber out. So they're going to be a little bit less. And so then it's after the race, you really want to pick those back up and make sure that you've got a lot of colors in your plate. So they're also going to obviously give you fiber, but also lots of your antioxidants. So they're going to be bringing also lots of vitamins and minerals that are going to help with those repair processes and a lot of that inflammation in your body from, doing those runs and help to get you back out, help to support your immune system. Obviously that can be a little bit suppressed, after doing those type of events as well. So it's really about coming back to those balanced plates, focusing on your good quality carbohydrates, your protein, and lots of colors and veggies. But I will say often after doing those big events, sometimes it can be hard because you might not actually have much of an appetite. And so that's where it can be important to still make sure you're eating. It might even just be smaller meals more often, or it might be utilizing things like smoothies or stuff that you can still, whether it's, blending some berries and milk or things like that, you're still going to be getting nutrients in, even if your appetite is a little bit suppressed after something like that.
Yeah, awesome. Now, as always happens when you and I start talking about pretty much anything, we've gone way past the 30-minute mark that we were planning on
Oh
doing
yeah.
today. Yeah, it's like as we said to Lincoln earlier on, guys, that Karen and
Oh
I could
yeah.
probably just talk for hours, and we probably will. So let's do a final wrap up. What are the
Yeah.
important points for us to hit? What's the wrap up on this? And any final tips about nutrition with 39 days to go for the amazing KMR event that we've got at the end of March?
So for 39 days to go, I would encourage anyone who is doing the run, sit down, write out your nutrition plan. And that is going to be, what are you going to eat every hour, and also drink. So making sure that's one thing that I actually didn't touch on very much was your hydration. And so that actually does play an important part in terms of making sure you are consistently drinking. And because we start early, you might not need to drink as much early on as what you will need to through the heat of the day. Depending on how long you're out there, that may drop off again towards the end. But making sure that you are actually keeping your fluids up with your food intake as well. So sit down, make a plan, and think about what you're going to eat. And even if it's not specific numbers in terms of carbohydrates, maybe choose 2 things that you're going to eat every hour, and know what that is, and go out and practice that in your runs. And if that's the only thing that people do between now and the run, then they'll get through the run a lot better, enjoy it a lot more, and keep coming back for next year's.
Brilliant. And for our guys out there, if you see Karen out on course, she will be out there. She said she's doing the solo. Give her a high five, give her some encouragement, throw her a snake or 2. She'll definitely love those.
Yes.
So that's it. We're going to wrap up the nutrition talk for this year. Once again, Karen Hill, thank you very much for being with us. Give her a follow on Instagram at Holistic Coaching. She puts all sorts of wonderful stuff up there around nutrition, and is a really good follow. We've still got a couple more of these to go over the next couple of weeks with the team from Keyser, and as well as some chats with our scholarship holders who are out there have been out there training for a few months. They had their training camp a couple of weeks ago. They're getting ready to hit the mountain and get up there and run with Kunani. We are 39 days away from the massive event that is Kunani Mountain Run. We can't wait to see you all there. We can't wait to see you all again next week. Thank you once again, Karen. I am at Maney_MC_Taz. See you all next time, guys.
See ya.